This patriotism is the new punk rock.
While Michael's making sure the rest of our broadcast is going swimmingly across all of our other networks, we'd like to welcome everybody to another edition of the weekly roundup, Roundtable, by our good friends here at the Liberty First Foundation, Michael Marshall, Jeremy Bishop, Michael Vasquez, and myself, Frank Johnson. We want to welcome everybody to the show. We encourage everybody to comment, ask questions, get involved, agree or disagree. Hold us over the fire. We like getting roasted a little bit. So with that, I'm going to turn the show over to Mike and Mike, who's up at the top bracket, and let him do his weekly welcome while I enjoy another swig of this Reed's Extra Ginger beer. Probably the most horrible thing.
My drink has ginger beer in it too.
If we're going to get our country back, we need to have open and honest dialogue. We need to quit being divided. We need to quit being allowing our political positions to keep us in boxes separated from each other.
You would be surprised how many companies out there have gotten so woke that even the word liberty is an insult to them and they don't want to deal with it. So we have to travel extensively to find manufacturers that'll just carry logos for us. They wouldn't engrave our logo on that lighter unless we sent them a legal disclaimer saying that we owned it. Even though I was calling them from a phone number that said Liberty First Foundation on the caller ID, sent them a fax from the same phone line, an email that said Liberty First Foundation, our own header. I couldn't get one lighter engraved for Michael's birthday. I thought it was the most ridiculous thing. So if you imagine how hard it is getting one lighter engraved, imagine how hard it would be for us to get a whole bunch of lunch boxes put together. But now it's to the point where liberty is the stigma.
Yeah.
And who would have thought just in a few years that would have become a dirty word?
And here's the thing. They're starting to tag organizations that have liberty in their name as domestic terrorists.
Well, look at what happened. I was going to say, just look at what happened in North Dakota with the 18-year-old. He didn't even have to say anything other than I'm a Republican. And we saw that demonic, insane man decided that, you said you're a Republican. Well, Joe Biden says you're a domestic terrorist. You're an extremist. And he ran the kid over with his truck. An 18-year-old, this 41-year-old man ran over an 18-year-old because the kid had an idea that he did not like, that Joe Biden doesn't like, that we have divided our nation to think that someone with a different idea is dangerous to the point that you would run them over with a truck. The kid's on foot. This is the danger. And so it's not a surprise that when we say liberty, and you say liberty, and all of a sudden every business is like, oh, I'm scared now. I don't know what to do.
And then to add insult to injury, Kyle on video. They have him on video defending his own wife. He gets hit with $2 million bill. This guy, this lunatic, runs this 18-year-old kid over, murders him with his truck, admits to the police he ran him over because of his political view, called the kid's mother to brag how he murdered this woman's child, and gets $50,000 bail release.
Oh, did you hear what happened when he was in the court? When he was in the courtroom, he was saying, why do I have to pay $50,000 because I have a family, I have a house, I have jobs and bills? Why should I have to pay $50,000 for murdering an 18-year-old? That they have dehumanized them, and he's not even sensitive to the fact that he just took away that kid's job, his potential for a family, affected his family and his friends, and denied him the opportunity to own any ever again. And he had no appreciation of it, and is in the courtroom arguing with the judge why he would be charged $50,000, where I'm thinking, why doesn't he get $5 million to make the point that it is in America It is inhumane and insane to ever consider having physical conflict with anyone else just because they have an idea you don't like. My God, where have we allowed some of these people to take us where that is a realistic concern these days? This is crazy.
And I also don't understand how none of our political punditry across our major news networks have come down and attributed this case of violence to, Mr. Biden has come out and called the MAGA Republicans the threats of democracy, enemies of the state. Or that guy who's running for Senate who said, we have to kill this movement. We have to confront it and kill it. Now, I remember there was a time when Nancy Pelosi was being interviewed. She was talking about the rhetoric, the horrible, violent rhetoric coming from the Bush administration and then the Trump administration. Where is she talking about the rhetoric coming from this administration or the people that are running to become part of that ticket? I don't understand. I mean, you have I'm never the one who comes out and says that guy who shot up the ballpark when Scalise got shot. I didn't go blaming the Democrats for what some guy did.
No.
This is what some friggin' lunatic did. You blame the lunatic. All right. When somebody goes out there and runs over people in Charlottesville, I blame the guy who drove the car. People do things that are evil every single day. They are responsible for it. Just because something is politically based doesn't necessarily mean that there's a politician crept into that person's house, planted the seed through a hole in the brain, and let that fester and controlled them remotely from K Street. People are responsible for their own actions. So I'm not the first person. I'm not going to be the guy who condemns Biden or condemns this other guy. But all I am going to say is, where is the balance in media when they call conservative talking points calls for violence and murder, but no one will ever do the same thing when it comes to left-wing talking points, when the results of left-wing talking points can be just as, if not more, heinous than that of which they condemned earlier.
You're being too nice, Frank. This is a direct consequence of the Philadelphia Joe Biden commentary saying that, and he said, MAGA Republicans are domestic extremists and terrorists. He came out and said it on national, international news with the full force of the United States government, 2 Marines standing behind him with optics, making sure that he was embedded in a red light, blood red imagery coming straight out of Emperor Palpatine, coming straight out of the Reichstag. I mean, he knew the optics. His team knew the optics that they were putting out for the nation with the wording in that speech, which was a political speech. It was not a national speech. This should have never been paid for by American taxpayers. This was a political speech that had one goal. That was to demonize his political opponents and to silence them for fear of what would come next. And what has come next is this kid in North Dakota being targeted in the same wording, with the same logic, verbatim coming out of Joe Biden's mouth, just like we've heard from the others. But he is the guy sitting in the White House. He was the guy who went on national TV, totally ignoring the Americans that he abandoned in Afghanistan, forgetting about the Americans he's abandoned in the Ukraine. Literally right now, tens of thousands of, literally 10,000 Americans. He's the one who has been trotting around for the last 18 months saying that if you have any opposition to anything that he has to say, you are the problem, you are the issue, you are the extremist, whether you're vaccinated or not, or whether you happen to believe in an America First policy. And he is saying that if you want to preserve the nation, the Constitution, our system of life, which is not perfect, but it is the best in the world, and that demonic man with his team came out and asked for this to happen. They knew this was the consequence and they didn't care. And I will call them out for that because I think that is inciting violence. I'm sorry, guys. This has got me.
No, you're perfectly justified in what you feel. I keep trying to train myself not to be the scumbag. You know what I'm saying? I keep trying to be somebody who's going to be slightly above what they've been doing to our side of the aisle for so many years now. I keep trying to be that person. I'm trying not to give in to what I would like to say, which is exactly what you said, because I still say, well, in a court of law, could Biden be charged with inciting this?
Yes. Yes. Would he?
Could he be convicted of it?
They are.
Because we can indict a ham sandwich, we can't convict one.
Here's the thing.
Well, I could eat one. I'm freaking hungry.
Okay, this is the whole January 6th committee.
Yeah,
is trying to come down on Trump for inciting the January 6th event because of his rhetoric. And here we have a sitting president that is literally using his platform to do the exact same thing they are accusing Trump of.
Even since he's made that, even members of the left have had to turn around and say he went too far. How many of them said that language is too incendiary? And I'm not saying that presidents aren't incendiary from time to time, that they're not very passionate or even objectionable. We've had that through our history, but I've never even heard of anyone get this close to 1939 Germany. And I don't like to make the whole German World War II analogy or comparison very often because it's overused. But I think this is appropriate. And now we're seeing literally after the Reichstag, that's when we got Kristallnacht. For those Americans or anyone who doesn't know what that is, or I'm pronouncing it improperly in German, that's the night of the broken glass. It was right after the Reichstag speech in 1939. It was, I believe, September of 1939. Please look it up if people don't know it. And what we saw is that was the flame that lit the brown shirts going out after the Jews. It was the start of the censorship, massive censorship, openly and blatantly. There was no more hiding behind certain veiled words. It wasn't hiding behind laws and statutes that might be interpreted one way or another. It was just blatant and open. And now we're seeing this with this guy in North Dakota who's trying to use the whole bail reform to get him and cashless bail to get himself off and to discount what he's done. And the major news media overwhelmingly are like, well, what story in North Dakota? Something happened in North Dakota? Oh, well, it's not that big a deal. It's not national news.
I'd like to see this. I'd like to see this story get brought up into the January 6th committee because there has been a little bit of pushback. I was watching some of the footage earlier this week about the claim that one of the officers was beaten to death on the steps of the Capitol with a fire extinguisher. When it did not happen.
No.
And it was entered into the record, as a matter of fact, that an officer was beaten to death on the steps of the Capitol building with the fire extinguisher. It was later had to be retracted because
it's factually incorrect.
Bullshit. It's bullshit.
Purely false.
Yeah. But I would like to see one of those few conservative leaning members that might be on that committee, not Miss Cheney, say, hey, listen, by the way, if you want to talk about incitement, hey, This has got a lot more of a direct correlation versus the guy who said go out and protest in peace, be peaceful, and all the rest of that. It'd be nice to see that. But getting back to your analysis of Kristallnacht is exactly right. The way that everything happened in Germany and the steps that took place, that was the beginning of the Holocaust. There's only one reason.
Vast talk. Oh, sorry.
I said there's only one reason why that hasn't begun here, at least to the extent that it began in Germany, and that's Amendment Number 2.
Yeah.
I was going to say, you try and run me over because of my political views, you might get me to run over. But you're going to have a couple of holes in your windshield on the way. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
You know, that 18-year-old kid didn't have that luxury afforded to him because he's too young to defend himself. Not too young to be murdered, just too young to defend himself. Old enough to vote, but old enough to join the military, old enough to get married, have a family, and do everything else, but he's too young to drink and he's too young to defend himself.
What were you going to say?
Well, I think, Vast, when you touched on if it was appropriate to use the, Nazi Germany reference, not only do I think it's appropriate, I think it's almost mandatory at this point because people refuse to look at it like that. I really wanted to talk tonight about the situation in Iran, and I think this goes hand in hand with it, but the way I'm going to tie the two together is, so apparently this is okay, what Biden said is okay, what this guy running for office in, where was it, he said he wanted to kill the movement and the MAGA movement and silence it. It's okay, but that's okay, and I'm seeing a ton of social media coverage of these, protests. They're not riots, they're protests in Iran over what's going on over there, and I'm seeing a lot of support for what's going on over there and how it's okay for them to burn down their city. But the January 6th, the protest that got a little heated, but that was the end of the world for America. But everything else going on, Kenosha, this situation, and everything else happening right now, the Chaz in Washington, that's out of line. It's unbelievable to me.